Chapter 7. The Gift. After he left Pleydell Smith's office, Bond worked for an hour in the library at King's House. He found a good map of Crab Key, and he made notes about the geography of the island. He also made a drawing of the map. Crab Key was about 20 miles north from the northern shore of Jamaica. Dr. No's island wasn't very big. It was about 12 miles long from east to west and about 4 miles wide from north to south. There was high ground at the western end of the island. At the furthest western point there was a mountain. On one side of the mountain a steep cliff went down to the sea. It was on this part of the island that the green cormorants lived. The birds lived on the rocks of the steep cliff. The birds' droppings, the guano, was collected from the rocks and loaded into ships. The larger part of the island, the eastern part, was an area of swamp. In the middle of this low, swampy ground there was a lake, and from this lake a small river ran towards the sea in the south. The river flowed into the sea at a small sandy beach, about halfway along the island's south coast. Bond knew that the bird sanctuary was in the swampy area of the island. He guessed that the warden's camp was probably close to the place where the river flowed out of the lake. The wardens could drink the water from the lake. Also, the river was an easy route to the sea. The warden's camp was not shown on the map in King's House Library, but that was because the map was old. It had been made many years before the roseate spoonbills were found on the island. By 4 o'clock, Bond had done everything that he could do at King's House. He felt tired. He decided to return to the Blue Hills Hotel and rest for a while. As Bond entered the hotel, a member of the staff called out to him. "Mr. Bond?" "Mr. Quarrel phoned earlier this afternoon," the young woman said. "He gave me a message for you. He said, 'I've arranged everything. Also, a messenger brought a gift for you. It's a basket of fruit. The messenger took it up to your room.'" "That's strange. Who sent this gift?" Bond asked. "The messenger said that it was from the acting governor's assistant at King's House," the young woman replied. Bond went to his room and very, very quietly unlocked the door. Then he took out the Walther PPK. With the gun in his hand, he suddenly kicked the door open. There was no one in the room, so he entered carefully. He checked all the cupboards in the bedroom, then he checked the bathroom. When he was sure that no one was hiding anywhere, he shut and locked the door of the main room. On a table in a corner of the room there was a huge basket of fruit. Oranges, grapefruit, bananas, apples, peaches. On top of the fruit there was a white card with a message which said, "A gift from the acting governor." Bond knew that the acting governor disliked him. Why on earth would the man send him fruit? Bond was very suspicious. He put his ear next to the basket and listened very carefully. There were no strange sounds. Next, he quickly pushed the basket off the table and jumped backwards. The fruit fell onto the floor. There was nothing else in the basket. No bombs, no poisonous snakes or spiders. But he was still suspicious about this gift. Bond picked up one of the peaches. It was very ripe. Soon it would be too ripe. Anyone who wanted to eat the fruit would eat this peach first. Bond put the peach on the table. Then he took a small magnifying glass from one of his cases. As he unlocked the case, he noticed something. Someone had tried to open the case while he'd been out that day. They hadn't opened the case because it was very strong, and it had special locks. It had been made by an SIS engineer, but someone had tried to open it, and that made Bond more suspicious than ever. He looked through the magnifying glass and checked the peach very carefully. He found a tiny brown hole in the skin of the fruit. Had someone put something into the peach? Was someone trying to poison him? Well, This is a war, then, Bond said to himself. Dr. No has decided to start a war with the SIS. It's time for me to stir things up for that gentleman. Bond checked all the other fruits. They all had tiny holes in them. Somebody wasn't sure if Bond liked peaches. Bond picked up the phone by his bed and he called King's house. He asked to speak to the Colonial Secretary. "You said that you wanted to help me," Bond said to Pleydell Smith when he answered the call. "Well, there is something that you can do for me. I've received a gift. It's a basket of fruit. It's here in my hotel room. I want you to find a scientist who can make some tests on it. I want someone to find out if there's poison in the fruit. Please, can you send a messenger to collect it now? I won't be here tomorrow." Bond listened for a moment to the other man's reply. Then he spoke again. "I'll be at Bow Desert, near Morgan's Harbor, for the next week or two," he said. "Will you send the scientist's report to me there, please? Please, don't tell anybody else about the report, and please don't tell anybody where I've gone. You wanted me to stir things up again, and I'm going to do that soon. But the acting governor won't like it. So don't tell him what I'm doing, and please, don't tell your secretary, Miss Taro, about this. This is most important. I'll explain the reason when I see you again. Goodbye." When he finished his call, Bond started thinking. Should he contact London? Perhaps he should tell his boss that everything had changed and that he needed some help from London. There were some dangerous people doing some bad things on Jamaica. Bond could ask M to declare an emergency and to send more agents. He could tell M that Dr. No had tried to kill him with poisoned fruit. But was that a good idea? He didn't know yet if the fruit was poisoned, and he wasn't sure that Dr. No had sent it. M might think, "What's this nonsense about poisoned peaches? 007 has completely lost his nerve, and now he's become crazy. He must come home." After a few minutes, Bond decided not to contact London, but he was taking a risk. If something did go wrong now and he hadn't sent a warning to M, Bond would be in trouble. He might lose his job, or he might die. Well, he told himself, I must make sure that nothing goes wrong. After the messenger from King's house had taken away the fruit, Bond had a meal and a few drinks. Then he locked all the windows of his room. Finally, he packed his bags and he went to bed early. He had to be ready to leave the hotel soon after 6 o'clock the next morning. The night was hot, so he covered himself with only a sheet. In the middle of the night, James Bond woke up suddenly. What had woken him? He listened carefully. There was no sound. The room was very dark, so he could see nothing but the numbers on his luminous watch. The time was 3 a.m. Then Bond felt a movement on his right foot. Something was starting to move slowly up his leg. Was it a snake? Was it an insect? If it was some kind of insect, it was a big one. Bond thought it must be about 6 inches long. And he could feel its feet lightly touching his skin as it moved. How many feet did this creature have? 100? Suddenly Bond knew what was crawling over his body. It was a centipede. As he realized this, the hair on his head stood up straight and he went cold with fear. He knew that some centipedes in the Caribbean were very, very dangerous. If this creature bit him and its poison went into his body, Bond would probably die. Now the centipede had reached his knee. Bond knew that there was only one thing that he could do. He had to remain completely still. If he moved, the creature would bite him. But it was difficult to remain still while the centipede moved up his body. The next 5 minutes passed very slowly for Bond. They seemed more like 5 hours. The centipede walked across Bond's stomach and onto his chest. Bond started to sweat. Drops of water started to come out of his skin. The creature stopped for a while over Bond's heart. If it bites me there, he told himself, I'll certainly die. But the centipede moved on slowly, and it reached Bond's shoulder. Bond tried to hold his body absolutely still, but the muscles of his stomach, arms, and legs started to tremble. He must not move. He felt the centipede crawl up his neck, onto his chin and over the corner of his mouth. Then it moved along his nose. He closed his eyes. A moment later, the creature was moving over his left eye. Bond felt ill with disgust and fear. The centipede stopped for a while on his head. What if the creature got caught in his hair? Bond realized that it was drinking his sweat. Then it slowly crawled off his head onto his pillow. A moment later, Bond jumped up from the bed, switched on the light, and grabbed one of his shoes. He watched while the huge brown centipede crawled down the side of the bed and onto the floor. Then he crashed the shoe down onto the insect as hard as he could. The centipede's body burst open, and yellow liquid came out of it. Bond ran to the bathroom and vomited. Chapter 8. The Journey to Crab Key. At 6:30 the next morning, Bond and Quarrel were driving out of Kingston in an Austin 830. They were driving towards the north coast. They'd already seen the two men who were dressed like Bond and Quarrel drive off towards Montego in the Sunbeam Alpine. The two men that Quarrel had hired were not honest people, but they wanted the money and they were happy to do the job. Bond was pleased with his friend's choice. Annabelle Chung must have given descriptions of us to her boss, Bond told his friend. If any of Dr. No's men are watching the road for the Sunbeam Alpine, they'll have those descriptions with them. The men that you hired look very like us, so the watchers will think that we are in the Sunbeam. Now, I have a question to ask you, Quarrel. What do you know about centipedes? Centipedes are bad creatures, Captain, Quarrel replied. And Jamaican centipedes are very poisonous. But where do they usually live? Bond asked. Oh, they always live in dark, dirty places, Quarrel answered. They live under old wooden buildings and in other places like that. Do they ever go into clean, tidy places? Places like hotel rooms? Bond asked. Do they ever climb into people's beds? No, Captain, said Quarrel. He looked at Bond carefully. Bond didn't say any more about centipedes. He didn't want to worry his friend. He asked Quarrel about the best way to get to Morgan's Harbor. But later, Bond thought again about what Quarrel had said. If I found a centipede in my hotel room, then someone put it there, he told himself. Someone's certainly trying to kill me. He decided not to tell his friend about the fruit. The house at Bow Desert was exactly what Bond wanted. It was a small, white wooden house beside the sea. On 3 sides of the house there were fields. There were no other houses close to it. Bond and Quarrel would have privacy there. After they arrived, they ate supper. Then Quarrel asked Bond what his plans were. Well, first I need to get completely fit, Bond replied. For the first week, that's all that I'm going to think about. You'll be my personal trainer. We'll work on my fitness every day. Please think of a training routine for me. Then when I'm really strong again, we need to visit Crab Key. But I don't want Dr. No to find out about our visit. We'll go in a small boat, perhaps a canoe. Captain, you must be crazy, Quarrel said. Crab Key is a very dangerous place. I've heard stories about it. Very bad things happen there. It'll be okay, Quarrel, said Bond, smiling. I don't want to go near the places where Dr. No and his workers live. I only want to visit the warden's camp at the bird sanctuary. I need to find out what happened there. And I do need your help. Quarrel was silent for a few moments. Then he spoke. I'll help you, Captain. You know that, he said quietly. But there's one thing that I want to ask you. I have a family in the Cayman Islands. If I die, they'll be poor. Will you buy some life insurance for me? Then, if anything bad happens, my family will have some money." "Yes, I'll do that for you," Bond answered. "We'll go to Port Maria in the morning. I'll arrange everything there. I'll insure your life for £5,000. "You're a good man, Captain," said Quarrel. "Where do you want to land on Crab Key?" "There's a sandy beach halfway along the south side of the island," Bond replied. "A small river flows into the sea there. I want to land at that beach, then move up the river. I think that the warden's camp was beside that river near a lake. No one must see us arrive. That's most important." "We'll go at night," said Quarrel. "We'll go in a canoe with a sail. We'll make the journey in about 1 week's time. The winds will be blowing in the best direction then. Also, there won't be much moonlight in 7 days' time. We'll be able to land without anyone seeing us. We'll need to take enough food for 3 days." "Okay," Bond replied. "Bring your knife. I'll bring a gun." The next morning the two men went into Port Maria, and Bond bought Quarrel some life insurance. And the morning after that, the fitness training began. Each day Bond and Quarrel got up at 7 a.m., and they swam a quarter of a mile in the sea. Then they had breakfast, rested in the sun for 1 hour, and ran a mile along the beach. Then they swam another quarter of a mile. At midday they ate lunch. After that they slept for an hour, rested in the sun for another hour, then swam a mile. After all this exercise they took hot baths, and then Quarrel massaged Bond's body. He rubbed oil into the parts of Bond's body which had lost their strength during his illness. Then the two men ate dinner. By 9 p.m. they were asleep. This training routine was hard work for Bond, but after a week he was feeling much stronger and fitter. During this week, 2 things happened which made Bond more suspicious about Dr. No. First, he read a report in the Daily Gleaner newspaper about a road accident. 2 men had been killed near Spanish Town on the road between Kingston and Montego. A truck had been traveling too fast. It had crashed into the Sunbeam Alpine that the men were in. The police wanted to talk to Mr. James Bond, who had borrowed the car from the acting governor. The other thing that happened was that a note arrived from Pleydell Smith. A scientist had checked the fruit which had been sent to Bond at the Blue Hills Hotel. Each fruit had contained a lot of powerful poison. Bond burned the newspaper, and he didn't tell Quarrel about the note. Quarrel was already worried about the mission to Crab Key. Bond didn't want to worry him more. At the end of the training week, Quarrel hired a canoe from a man in Port Maria. The canoe was a simple kind of boat which was made from half of a tree. It had a small sail as well as 2 heavy wooden paddles. For 3 days Bond and Quarrel practiced sailing and paddling the canoe along the northern coast of Jamaica. "It's a good canoe," Quarrel said. "It'll get us to Crab Key easily. We'll be able to use the sail for the first 7 or 8 hours of the journey. After that, we'll take down the sail and only use the paddles. If we don't use the sail near the island, Dr. No may not see us on his radar." At last, the evening came when Bond and Quarrel were going to start their dangerous mission. Bond was excited. He put on a pair of black jeans and a dark blue shirt. It was good to get back to work. He had a good man to help him, and he knew that his enemy, Dr. Julius No, was a very bad person. Bond was licensed to kill, and now he had to kill Dr. No before Dr. No killed him. Bond checked both his guns. Which one should he take on this mission? The Walther PPK or the Smith & Wesson? He decided to take the Smith & Wesson. It could shoot further than the Walther PPK. The night was very dark. There was no moon in the black sky, only sparkling stars. At about 8:30, Bond and Quarrel put their backpacks into the canoe. The packs contained enough food for 3 days. Then they pushed the canoe out into the sea and picked up the paddles. Nobody saw the 2 men leave. For 15 minutes, Bond used his paddle to pull the canoe through the water. Quarrel was steering the boat with his own paddle. At the end of that time, Bond stopped paddling and the 2 men put up the sail. Soon the canoe was moving quickly through the water. All through the night, one of the men would have to steer the boat. He would have to look at the stars in the sky to find the right direction. And while one of them steered the boat, the other could sleep. They decided that first Quarrel would steer for 3 hours while Bond slept, then Quarrel would wake Bond, and Bond would steer while Quarrel slept. When they got near the island, both men would have to be awake. Bond was tired, and after a few minutes he fell asleep. He slept until midnight when Quarrel woke him. For the next 3.5 hours Bond steered the canoe while his friend slept. Although the night was too dark to see anything around him, there were sounds for Bond to hear. Sometimes fish were swimming beside the boat. Bond could hear them jumping out of the water and falling back into it. And Bond knew that in the sea, deep below the boat, much bigger fish were swimming. Sharks, bonito, barracuda, perhaps even giant squids. Quarrel woke at 4 a.m. "We must be near the island now, Captain," he said. The 2 men took down the sail and they started to use the paddles to pull the boat through the water. Soon there was a narrow line of light in the sky to the east, and then, in the first light of the morning, they could see Crab Key ahead of them. They worked hard with the paddles as they got nearer and nearer to the land. They turned towards the east, and then they steered the canoe along the island's shore. Now there was enough light to see the little river and the sandy beach. "We must hurry," Bond said. "We need to hide the canoe before anybody sees it. We must hide the canoe, and we must cover our tracks." There were some bushes at the edge of the sandy beach. Bond and Quarrel pulled the heavy canoe into these bushes and covered it with leaves and branches. Then Quarrel cut some big leaves from a palm tree. He used these to sweep the sand. As he walked backwards towards the bushes, he brushed sand over their footprints. He covered their tracks. It was 5 o'clock now, and both men were tired. They hid in the bushes and lay down on the sand. In a few moments, they were asleep. Chapter 9. The Girl on the Beach. Bond woke suddenly. He looked at his watch. It was now 10 o'clock in the morning. Quarrel was no longer lying nearby. He must have woken earlier and started exploring, Bond thought. A moment later he heard someone moving through the water on the shore. Then the sound stopped. Bond looked through the bushes towards the sea. He was expecting to see his friend on the beach, but it wasn't Quarrel who was standing there. It was a young woman who was wearing a swimsuit. She had her back towards Bond, and she was looking at the sea. A green rubber diving mask was pushed onto the top of her head. She was holding a large bag made of a piece of fishing net. There were many large pink, white, and purple seashells in the bag. Around her waist, the girl had a wide leather belt with a knife in it. Her skin was a golden brown color, and her legs were long and slim. Her long, pale blonde hair was cut off straight at her shoulders. Bond looked at the girl's beautiful body for a moment longer. But this wasn't a good time to think about beautiful women. Bond was on a dangerous mission. This girl was going to be a problem for him. If she lives on the island, she's a danger to us, Bond thought. If she lives here, she either works for Dr. No, or she's his girlfriend. If she finds out that Quarrel and I are here, she'll tell Dr. No, and then he'll send his men to find us. But if she came to the island secretly like us, she'll still be a danger to us. If she's a secret visitor to Crab Key, perhaps she's been less careful than we were. Dr. No's radar might have told the guards about her already, and if Dr. No's guards come to look for her, they might find us too. I need to talk to her. Before he moved, Bond looked more carefully along the beach. A small canoe had been pulled up onto the sand. The girl must have come to the island in the canoe, so she didn't work for Dr. No. Tracks in the sand led from the canoe to where the girl was standing. There was only one set of tracks, so there was nobody else with her. Bond stood up and walked quietly out of the bushes onto the beach. "Good morning," he said. "Who are you?" As the girl turned round quickly, she pulled the long knife from her belt. Her face was as beautiful as her body. "If you try to touch me, I'll kill you," the girl said angrily. "Please don't do anything silly. I don't want to hurt you," Bond said. "Have you got some more clothes in your canoe?" The girl nodded her head. "Good. Please put them on," Bond said politely. "I need to talk to you." The girl walked towards her canoe, picked up a white shirt and a brown skirt and put them on. Then she turned back towards Bond and smiled at him. She had very beautiful blue eyes. "I'm sorry that I was rude to you," she said. "It's okay. Forget about that," Bond replied. "Now, tell me about yourself, please. What's your name? How did you get here? Where have you come from? What are you doing here?" "What a lot of questions," the girl said. "Well, my name is Honey Rider. I'm Jamaican. I came here in the canoe that you can see. I came here from Morgan's Harbor. I often come here at night. I collect seashells from the sea around this island. I dive deep into the water to find them." Bond was surprised. It was a long and difficult journey from Morgan's Harbor to Crab Key. If the girl often came to the island alone, she must be a very good sailor. "Why do you collect seashells, honey?" asked Bond. "It's a long way to come just for some shells." "Collecting shells is my job," the girl replied. "There are some very valuable shells in the sea near this island." She pointed at the shells in her net bag. "These shells are very rare and unusual," she went on. "Some people will pay a lot of money for unusual shells. I sell the shells that I find to a man in Kingston. He sells them to a store in Miami, in the USA. How do you know which shells to collect?" Bond asked. "Oh, I know all about the creatures that live in the sea and on the land in these islands," the girl told him. "I've been interested in them since I was very young. I wanted to get a job studying the small animals that live in the sea and on the shore near the sea. But you need to study at a university before you can get a job like that. That wasn't possible for me. I didn't have enough money to go to a university. So now I collect and sell shells." "Now tell me about you," Honey said after a few moments' silence. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" "My name is Bond, James Bond. I'm British," Bond replied. "I'm here because I'm interested in birds. There are some very rare birds here on this island. They're called roseate spoonbills. I want to study them. But the owner of this island, Dr. No, won't let anyone come here to see them. So I've come secretly with a friend. My friend is exploring the island at the moment, but he'll be back here soon." "Oh, I know about the spoonbills," Honey said. "There used to be lots of those birds on this island, but they've gone now. The Chinese man who lives here has a dragon. It hunts in the swamps. It kills things by breathing fire at them. I've seen it. It attacked the spoonbills. It killed some of them and the others left." "There aren't any dragons here," Bond said. "Dragons are not real animals. They only exist in stories. You must know that. You know all about the animals of these islands. I don't know what creature you saw, but it certainly can't have been a dragon." "I'm not stupid," the girl replied angrily. "Nobody has ever lived at the east end of this island. Perhaps a strange animal lives there which no one else has ever seen." "There were two men who lived in this part of the island for a while," Honey continued. "They had a camp near the place where the birds lived. I think that the dragon attacked them too. I haven't seen them for a long time." Bond thought about the words that the bird warden had spoken before he died. The man had talked about a fire-breathing dragon. The dragon, whatever it really was, sounded dangerous. But Honey didn't seem very worried about it. Perhaps she should be more worried. "Listen to me, Honey," said Bond. "Dr. No will be very angry if he finds out about your visits. It's very dangerous here. You should stop coming here." "Oh, don't worry about me, Mr. Bond," said the girl. "Please, call me James," said Bond quietly. "Well, James, please don't worry about me," the girl said. "I often come to this island. I need to earn money, and this is the only place where I can find the most valuable shells. Sometimes I've seen Dr. No's men searching the island, but they've never found me. I've always hidden from them quite easily. There was never any danger for me." "Perhaps there wasn't any danger until now," Bond replied. "There wasn't any danger because Dr. No's men weren't watching for secret visitors. But the doctor found out about my arrival in Jamaica. He knows that I'm interested in Crab Key, so now he's expecting a visit from me. His men will be watching this coast very carefully. He's already tried to kill me twice." "He tried to kill you just because you're interested in those birds?" said Honey. "Yes," Bond replied, "and he'll certainly try to kill me again if he finds me here. But he'll kill you too if he finds you here. Did you use your sail for the whole of your journey from Jamaica? Were you using your sail when your canoe approached the shore here?" "Oh, yes. I used the sail until I landed," the girl said. "I always do that." "Then Dr. No's radar must have shown him your arrival this morning," Bond said. "I'm sure of that. We must get away from this beach soon." At that moment, Quarrel came out from the bushes. "Hello, Quarrel," Bond called to him. "Where have you been?" "I've been exploring, Captain," the Cayman Islander replied. "I went as far as the headland at the west end of the beach." "And who is this young lady?" he asked. "This is Honey Rider," Bond said. "She collects shells from the sea around the island. Honey, this is my friend Quarrel." Then Bond looked carefully at his friend. "There's something worrying you, Quarrel. What's wrong?" "When I was at the headland, I saw a boat coming along from the west," Quarrel replied. "It's coming along the coast quite fast, and it's coming towards this beach. Dr. No's guards must know that we're here, Captain." "Okay, we must hide quickly," Bond said. "Honey, you must stay with us for now. And we must hide your boat. We'll all hide until Dr. No's men have gone. Perhaps they'll decide that nobody's here. Perhaps they'll think that their radar isn't working properly." Bond and Quarrel pulled the girl's canoe into the bushes. They covered it with some branches. It wasn't as well hidden as their own boat, but there was no time to do more. Quarrel used palm leaves to sweep sand over Honey's footprints. Then they all walked into the thick bushes. Bond and the girl went first. Quarrel came last, walking backwards, sweeping away their tracks as they walked. As they all hid among the bushes, they heard the sound of a boat's engine. Chapter 10. The Hunt. Dr. No's boat arrived opposite the empty sandy beach. It was a large grey boat with a powerful engine. Bond, Quarrel and Honey watched it from their hiding place in the thick bushes. As they watched, they heard the boat's engine stop. The boat stayed about 50 yards from the shore. For a few minutes, everything was completely quiet. There were 3 men in the boat. They were all Afro-Chinese. One man was standing at the boat's controls. One man was standing behind a powerful machine gun, which was fixed onto the deck of the boat. The third man was standing at the back of the boat. A loud hailer was hanging from a strap around this man's neck. He was looking along the beach through a pair of binoculars. Suddenly, the man with the machine gun looked straight towards the place where Honey's canoe was hidden. He said something to the other men, and a moment later all 3 guards were looking towards the same place. "They've seen the canoe," Bond whispered to Quarrel and Honey. "There'll be trouble now." The guard with the loudhailer lifted it to his mouth and began to speak. His voice was loud and clear. "We know that you're there," he said. "We've seen your canoe. Come out onto the beach now. If you've got weapons, throw them down on the sand. Then stand with your hands above your heads. Surrender now, and we won't hurt you." Bond, Quarrel, and the girl didn't move. They kept very still, and they tried to make no sounds. After a minute, the man with the loudhailer repeated his message. When there was still no answer, the man became angry. "You've had a chance to surrender peacefully," he shouted. "So now we'll have to make you come out. And this won't be so peaceful." A moment later, the terrible sound of the machine gun rattled and crashed around the quiet beach. The guard was firing hundreds of bullets above the bushes where Bond, Quarrel, and Honey were hiding. "Are you coming out now?" said the man with the loudhailer. Bond put his arm round Honey and pulled her close towards him. Her body was shaking with fear. "Don't be afraid," he whispered. "They'll go soon." The man fired the gun again. This time the machine gun bullets flew lower. They cut off the tops of the bushes where Bond, Quarrel, and Honey were hiding. Some bullets passed only a few inches above their heads. The noise was terrible. "We'll be back here soon," said the voice from the loudhailer. "If you're still alive, we'll find you. You won't get far. We'll bring dogs to hunt you." As soon as the guard had finished speaking, the boat's powerful engine started. Then the boat turned and it moved away. It went back in the direction from which it had come. When they could no longer see the boat, Bond spoke. "Quarrel, we must go to the river immediately," he said. "Then we must move along it towards the lake as fast as we can. There'll be lots of places in the swamp where we can hide if those men start looking for us. We're fugitives now, but they'll never find us in there. We'll leave our canoe hidden here," he went on. "Then we can use it to escape from the island when we return to the beach. I hope that we'll be back here tomorrow night." Then he turned to the girl. "Honey, those men shot at your canoe. It has lots of holes in it. It's useless now," he said. "You'll have to come with us." "Why can't we leave the island tonight?" the girl asked. "I still have to find out what happened to the roseate spoonbills," Bond replied. An hour later, Bond, Quarrel, and the girl were walking in the river. The brown, muddy water smelled bad, and it was deep. It came up as high as their waists. They had to walk in the water because there were mangrove trees growing on the banks of the river. The trees grew so close together that there was no ground to walk on. For about a mile the river was narrow, and the branches of trees on the 2 banks met above the fugitives' heads. The trees made a kind of tunnel which protected the 3 people from the sun. The midday sun was very hot, so this was a good thing, but they could walk only slowly on the soft, muddy bottom of the river. Soon the 2 men and the girl were tired and very dirty. "We must keep going forwards," Bond said to the others. "Those men will come back soon. They'll be hunting for us. We need to get as far from the coast as possible." At last the tunnel of trees ended, and the river became much wider. Bamboo plants grew here. To the west, Bond, Quarrel, and Honey could now see the mountain at the end of the island. The mountain was covered with white guano, and it was shining in the sun. There was a narrow track of metal built on the side of the mountain. Small carts on wheels ran on this track. The carts took the guano from the top of the mountain to Dr. No's factory. Around the bottom of the mountain there were some large grey huts. These were where the guano workers lived and worked. As the 3 fugitives watched, a big truck came out of one of the huts. It started to move quickly towards the mangroves and the river. "They're coming to look for us, Captain," Quarrel said. "That road doesn't come straight to the lake," said Honey. "It leads past the camp where those men who watched the spoonbills lived. I know because I've been there once." "I think that when Dr. No's men get to the lake, they'll leave their truck and come down the river towards us," Bond said. "They'll come in small boats. But there'll be guards at the beach now, so we can't go back to our canoe. We're in trouble, and there's not much that we can do." "There is something that you can do," Honey said. "You can cut some pieces of bamboo. A bamboo plant has a strong round stem like a tube. It has a hole down the center of it. Then you can lie on the bottom of the river with your head under the water. If you put one end of the bamboo tube in your mouth and keep the other end just above the surface of the water, you can breathe air through the tube. It's easy. I've done it myself. If you hide where the mangroves grow down into the river, no one can see the tops of the bamboo tubes." "That's a good idea, Honey," Bond said. "Quarrel, please will you cut some pieces of bamboo? While you do that, we'll find a good hiding place in the mangroves." Soon Quarrel had the bamboo tubes, and Bond and the girl had found a good place to hide. After 10 minutes, they heard the sounds of dogs barking and men shouting. The hunters were getting close. Bond, Quarrel, and Honey put the bamboo tubes in their mouths. Then they closed their fingers tightly over their noses and disappeared beneath the surface of the muddy river. Half an hour later, Bond, Quarrel, and the girl were moving up the river again. Dr. No's hunters had come and gone. There had been men in rubber boats. There had been men walking in the river with huge dogs. The hunters had carried powerful guns, and they had searched the area where Quarrel, Bond, and Honey had been hiding. But because the fugitives were under the water, the dogs had been unable to smell them, and none of the guards had seen the 3 small bamboo tubes amongst the mangroves at the edge of the river. Soon the sounds of the hunters and their dogs had disappeared. The hunters had gone, but Bond had waited for 5 minutes before he stood up. And when Bond had stood up, he'd realized that he hadn't been careful enough. The hunters had left one guard behind. The man saw Bond and lifted his rifle. He was going to shout for his friends. With great speed, Bond had pulled his Smith & Wesson from his pack and shot the man. Quarrel had pulled the guard's rifle from his hands. Then they had pushed the big Afro-Chinese man's body under the water, and it had disappeared. A few minutes later, Bond, Quarrel, and Honey moved on slowly and carefully. Chapter 11. The Dragon. The sun wasn't quite so hot now. As the air became cooler, insects and frogs started to call and sing. "It must be after 4 o'clock," said Bond. He was guessing the time. His watch was no longer working. "We'll reach the lake in about an hour from now. We'll make a camp there. We'll be safer when darkness comes." "James, why is everyone trying to kill you?" Honey asked him. "You haven't told me the truth about yourself, have you? You aren't here because of the spoonbills. Nobody takes a gun to study birds. And Dr. No's men are hunting you. Why? What are you doing here? Are you some kind of policeman?" "I'm sorry, Honey," Bond replied. "I'm sorry that I've led you into danger. I'll tell you all about it this evening. But yes, I am a kind of policeman. I work for the British government. I've come here to find out why 2 men from a bird sanctuary have died." "We should be safe if we camp on the east side of the lake this evening," Bond went on. "It's quite a large lake, and we'll see the hunters moving round the edges of it if they come. We'll have time to get away." "We can escape from the hunters," Honey said, "but perhaps Dr. No's dragon will come for us. The dragon can go through the water. I've seen it swim." Bond laughed. "Oh, the dragon? Well, perhaps the dragon will have an injured tail," he said. "Perhaps it'll have to stay at home tonight." "You won't laugh when you see it, James," Honey said. A few hours later, Bond, Quarrel, and Honey made a camp amongst some trees near the lake. Bond cleaned and dried the Smith & Wesson with his shirt. Quarrel dried the rifle. The girl tried to dry the food which had been in the men's backpacks. The food had got very wet when the fugitives were hiding in the river, but they couldn't make a fire because it would be seen by Dr. No's hunters. While the food was drying, Bond explored the edge of the lake near the camp. He saw some tracks in the mud which surprised him. They looked like the marks made by very large wheels. But Bond didn't understand what could have made the tracks. They were bigger than any wheel tracks he'd ever seen. After he'd returned to the camp, Bond, Quarrel, and Honey ate the cold food. Then Bond and the girl got ready to sleep. Quarrel was going to watch the lake. Bond and Honey sat together in the dark. Bond could feel the warmth of the girl's beautiful body beside him. "Tell me about your family, Honey," Bond said. "My family was poor," the girl replied. "We didn't have much money. My mother and father worked for a British man. He wasn't a kind man. Both my parents died when I was 5 years old. Then an old Jamaican woman looked after me." For a moment, the girl's voice became angry. "When I was 15, the British man wanted me to be his girlfriend. I didn't want that, but he wouldn't listen to me. He attacked me one night and he hurt me." Then suddenly her voice became quieter and softer. "That man is dead now," she said to Bond. "He can't hurt me again." "He's dead," Bond replied. "How did that happen?" "I killed him," the girl said. "I know all about the animals that live in these islands. I know where they hide and what they can do. One hot evening, I caught a spider, a black widow. It's a very poisonous kind of spider. The man always slept with his window open when it was warm. So that night I went to his house. I dropped the spider through the window into his bedroom. In the morning the man was very ill," the girl went on. "He must have been bitten by the spider. A week later, he was dead." Before he fell asleep, Bond thought about the centipede that someone had put into his hotel room. It was good to know about poisonous creatures if you wanted to kill someone in this part of the world. It was about midnight when the dragon came. Quarrel heard it first. It was smashing and breaking the trees on the other side of the lake. As it moved forward, the thing made a terrible roaring noise. Quarrel ran towards Bond and the girl and woke them. They all looked out from the trees, waiting for something to happen. Then, suddenly, they saw the dragon on the other side of the lake. There was no moon shining in the sky. The only light was from the stars, but they could just see the shape of an enormous animal with a long neck and 2 wings. The dragon moved into the water and started to cross the lake towards the fugitives at great speed. It had huge, very bright eyes. Every few seconds, flames shot out of its mouth. "Oh, James, the dragon is coming for us," Honey said. "You didn't believe me. Now you can see it for yourself." But Bond quickly understood what the dragon was, and he understood the tracks that he'd seen in the mud, too. "It's not an animal, Honey," he told the girl. "It's a machine. Its head and body are made of metal. They're fixed to a kind of tractor. The roaring noise is the sound of the tractor's engine. It has huge wheels, so it can move easily in swamps. It can cross rivers and lakes if they're not too deep. The dragon's eyes are really the tractor's headlights, and inside the head there's a flamethrower, a gun that shoots burning liquid. People use flamethrowers to destroy trees, bushes, and grass," Bond continued, "but soldiers also use them to destroy their enemies. Dr. No uses the dragon to frighten people away from his island, and he uses it to kill people who can't be frightened. It was this machine which frightened and killed the spoonbills. It also killed the wardens who used to live in the bird sanctuary." The terrible killing machine had almost reached the trees where the 3 people were hiding. Quarrel, who had been listening to Bond's words, suddenly ran forward. "You stay here with the girl, Captain," he shouted to Bond. "I'll try to stop the dragon." Quarrel was a very brave man, but he didn't have a chance against the machine. He fired the rifle at the dragon as he got close to it, and one of its eyes disappeared. But then a huge flame shot out of its mouth. Quarrel screamed as the flames hit him. A moment later, his burnt body lay on the edge of the lake. Honey cried out, and tears ran down her face. Bond was shocked and very angry. His good friend had tried to help them, and he had died in a terrible way. The dragon stopped about 6 feet from Bond and Honey's hiding place. The sky was lighter now, and Bond could now see that the vehicle was colored with red, black, and gold paint. It looked like a dragon in a Chinese picture. A loud voice came from the vehicle. Its driver was speaking through a loud hailer. "Surrender now, or I'll kill you too," the voice said. "Throw down your weapons on the ground. You have 10 seconds to surrender." "We have no choice, honey," Bond said quietly to the girl. "We have to surrender. Come on." The two of them walked to the edge of the lake, and Bond threw down his gun. He tried not to look at the burnt body of his friend lying in the mud. A door opened in the back of the dragon, and 2 men got out of the vehicle. They were both strong Afro-Chinese men. The tallest man held a machine gun. The other man was carrying 2 pairs of handcuffs. "Don't try to escape," the man with the gun said. "I've killed your friend. I'd be happy to kill you too. But Dr. No wants to talk to you. If you both come with us quietly and calmly, you might still be alive tomorrow. If you try to escape, I'll kill you now, both of you." The tall man kept his gun pointed at Bond, while the second man put a pair of handcuffs around the girl's wrists. Then he put handcuffs around Bond's wrists too. The 2 men pushed their prisoners inside the tractor, and a moment later the tall man started the engine.